2311 Racing is still searching for their second charter. A lot of drivers were not very happy with each other at the conclusion of the Cup Series race at Texas Motor Speedway, and the 2021 F1 schedule has officially been revealed. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to another video. We've got a ton of NASCAR stories and F1 stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go and just jump straight in those really quickly. We're going to start off with some small paint schemes, as we're going to talk about William Byron's 2021 Raptors scheme that we're going to see this weekend and at the championship race at Phoenix Raceway. I do like this paint scheme in some ways. I don't think this paint scheme is amazing, but I think the paint scheme is all right. I've seen a lot of people that have not been generally a big fan of this paint scheme, which I totally understand. The paint scheme does look iffy at points, but I do like this. For me, I actually do like this paint scheme quite a bit. I think did a really good job on the details. I think the car will look better on track than the rendering does. I don't think the rendering does really any justice in regards to that. But still, I mean, I like the paint scheme in some aspects. I think it's good in some ways, and I'm definitely looking forward to see this car out on the racetrack this weekend and at the championship race at Phoenix as well. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Dean Thompson. As Dean Thompson will be making his Truck Series debut at the championship race for trucks at Phoenix for Nice Motorsports. He also will drive the 40 for Nice Motorsports in the ARCA race, in the ARCA championship race, this weekend at Kansas Speedway. I'm not sure how good Team Thompson is as a race car driver. I have not really been watching the ARCA West Series this year at all, so I really don't have a good glimpse and a good image to see how good of a driver Dean Thompson is. But I think this is a really good opportunity for Dean Thompson. I think that these cars as a whole are not too bad for Nice Motorsports. You look at Carson Wear this year. I think Carson Wear has really done really good. Now, again, I'm not expecting him to do amazing in his debut. I think the goal for him is to try to finish top 25 in your Truck Series debut. If you can do that, I think that's really impressive with the Nice Motorsports equipment. I know, like I said, the Carson Wear has been really good, but the equipment for everyone else has kind of struggled at points. I do think that Nice Motorsports going next year, they do need to downsize, but this could be a really good opportunity for Dean Thompson, and I'm not sure which truck he'll drive. I think it would assume it'd be the 45 he would drive, but I would assume that Dean Thompson will have a good opportunity, and it's great to see that he's getting an opportunity to make his Truck Series debut. I think it's great as a whole for the sport. He's making his opportunity, and I'm wishing him the best of luck this weekend in ARCA, and also in his Truck Series debut at Phoenix. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Daniel Ricciardo. As Daniel Ricciardo this weekend for the F1 race at Circuit Americas will drive Dale Earnhardt's 1984 Chevy Monte Carlo at COTA. There was a bet made between him and Zach Brown. If Daniel Ricciardo won an F1 race in 2021, he would be, I think it was a podium or won a race, he would be able to drive Dale Earnhardt's 1984 Chevy Camaro. Well, he won a couple weeks ago in the Italian GP at Monza, and now he's going to be able to drive his car before the green flag drops for the F1 race this weekend at Circuit of the Americas. And to me, I think it's really exciting that he is going to get an opportunity to drive this car. Daniel Ricciardo is a huge fan of NASCAR. He's also a huge fan of Earnhardt Sr. and Earnhardt Jr. as well. So it definitely makes a lot of sense. I'm really glad he's able to win that bet. I know this year for him in F1 has not been really good compared to his teammate, who should probably have a win or two this year in F1. Daniel Ricciardo does have a win this year, but it has been very disappointing in other aspects for Daniel Ricciardo. But I'm very happy to see that Daniel Ricciardo is getting an opportunity to race, at least attempt to drive his car. I think it's really exciting. And I'm looking forward to seeing him at least be able to drive some pace laps around this car, because I think it's really awesome, and I'm happy about this for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Nick Sanchez. As Nick Sanchez is going to be running a partial Xfinity Series schedule in 2022 for BJ McLeod Motorsports. He will be driving full-time with Rev Racing. Now, it's already announced that Roger Krupp will be driving part-time for Alpha Prime Racing in 2022 Xfinity Series, a team that was formed by Cesar Baccarella and Tommy Joe Martins as a partnership. He will run most of the short tracks since he's not 18 years old. I think he's 18 years old right now. Roger Krupp will run on a part-time basis in Xfinity and eventually will go full-time in Xfinity 2023. Nick Sanchez is not clear how many races he's going to run next year for BJ McLeod Motorsports, but I do think that this is a really awesome and a really great opportunity for Nick Sanchez. I do think BJ McLeod Motorsports will have some decent runs with Nick Sanchez next year. I do think he's very talented. Again, we haven't really been able to see a good glimpse of him because I don't think ARCA's a great organization right now. I think he's third in the points, which is pretty good, and he's contended for podiums. I think he has a few podiums this year and has contended for wins in the ARCA series as a whole. But to me, I think that this is a great opportunity for Nick Sanchez. I'm looking forward to see how he's going to do. Good luck to Nick Sanchez next year, and hopefully he will have some good runs. I think the goal for him going in next year is just gain experience in Xfinity. I would assume he does well enough. He will go full-time full-time in Xfinity 2023. I think Xfinity Series is going to be really stacked next year. Nick Sanchez joins the elite class of drivers that will race. Good luck to him. Hopefully, we will have a really good runs come up here very, very well in Xfinity next year for BJ McLeod Motorsports. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Chad Fincham. As Chad Fincham is going to be driving the 6-6 for MBM Motorsports this weekend at Kansas in the Cup Series. Chad Fincham has made a few starts in Cups this year, and he's also made a few starts in Xfinity Series this year. The reason that Chad Fincham has not raced a lot this year in Cup or Xfinity is because funding has kind of dried up for Chad Fincham. He doesn't really have a lot of funding, but I think that this is a really, really good opportunity for Chad Fincham to get some more experience in the Cup Series. I'm not sure how he's going to do. We've seen Timmy Hill drive his car, and he's done pretty decent, and then we've seen David Starr drive his car, and he hasn't done very, very well. But I think Chad Fincham is getting a good opportunity to race this team. It's great to see that they're going to have both their cars, the 13 and 6-6, are going to be there. David Starr will drive that 13 this weekend for MBM Motorsports, so wishing the best of luck to Chad Fincham. Hopefully, maybe get a top 35. I think they end up finishing in the top 25 at Texas after all the big one happened. I think that David Starr got up top 25 with the 6-6 cars. Well, we'll see what happens, but Chad Fincham will drive 6-6 for MBM Motorsports this weekend. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Carson Wear. As Carson Wear is going to drive the 17 for SS Greenlight Racing this weekend in the Xfinity Series at Kansas International Raceway. Carson Wear has made quite a few starts in the Xfinity Series this year, and again, I'll be honest, his starts have not been entirely that impressive. He's gotten away at points this year, and I'm not expecting this car to run up front. Again, a goal I think for Carson Wear is to try to finish in the top 30. Again, we've seen a 17 car at points run top 20. We've seen JJ Yuli get in this car, and he's ran pretty well in top 20. We've seen Joey Gase get in this car, and he's ran pretty well overall as well. But Carson Wear has really not impressed me so far in a few select starts. I do think he has a really good chance going full-time just because Rick Ware has that connection with the SS Greenlight camp. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, but hopefully he'll get like a top 30, top 35, and that would be a really good finish for that 17, and will help him in the owner's point position as a whole going into next year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Parker Kligerman. As Parker Kligerman is going to drive the number 96 for Gaunt Brothers Racing this weekend at Kansas Speedway. This is the first time that Gaunt Brothers is racing in an intermediate track in they ran full-time last year, but this is the first time that they're running on an intermediate track this year, and this is Parker Kligerman's first start, I believe, since 2019 when he drove for the Gaunt Brothers Racing camp. I'm really excited to see that Parker Kligerman is actually going to be racing this weekend. I think Parker Kligerman actually has a shot of running really well in this car. I'm not saying that Parker Kligerman is going to win. I'm not even saying this car is going to finish in the top 20, but I think that the number 96 car, with Parker being this car, Parker can get the best out of equipment. I've seen this car run in top 25 and top 30 with Parker in this car in the past, and I think Parker will have a very strong run this weekend. I think he will for sure finish in the top 30 with the Gaunt Brothers Racing team, and I'm really happy to see that they are running this weekend. I'm really glad about that, because I think if Parker's also running well, he's not running trucks, but says trucks not racing right now, but I think Parker Kligerman has a very good shot of running really well this weekend. I'm wishing the best of luck, and good luck to Parker Kligerman this weekend. I think he will have a good run this weekend here at Kansas. We're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about updated COVID-19 protocols for the media. It was reported by multiple reporters that NASCAR has updated its COVID-19 protocols for media members in place for the remainder of the 2021 season. Masks will be optional for driver interviews outdoors. Media will be screened by COVID-19 sniffing dogs to make sure that they if they don't have COVID. If they don't have COVID, they will be able to go into the gate. If the dog smells and potentially smells that they have COVID, they will probably go ahead and have them go get tested. It's really good to see the NASCAR is starting to lose some of their restrictions, especially for media members. Because for like the last 5 or 6 weeks, NASCAR has had media members, they've had to wear masks, and have also had some social distancing in place. And the reason why I think that they are starting to remove some of these restrictions is COVID-19 cases across this country are dipping down in a major, major way. You still have quite a few COVID-19 cases, but you're starting to see those cases go down. And it's a lot better than where we were about a month or 2 ago with the Delta variant. We're in a much better position right there. So that's really, really good. Now, I do expect that some reporters are still going to probably end up wearing masks when they do interviews, which definitely makes a lot of sense. But at the same time, I'm really happy they are removing some of these restrictions. Again, they are still required indoors for drivers and media members, but I'm really happy to see that as a whole. It's great for the sport to see that they are heading in the right direction. I'm really happy about this for sure. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. It was reported this past Friday by Adam Stern that Bubba Wallace was the best-selling driver on NASCAR store last week, accounting for 1/3 of fall merchandise sales, following his win at Talladega. The special first win merchandise created to commemorate Dega represented about 20% of all sales on the store all week. This does not surprise me. I guarantee you that there are a lot of new fans that were going in and trying to buy Bubba Wallace here because, of course, Bubba Wallace picked up his first career NASCAR Cup Series victory a couple weeks ago at Talladega, which was really, really impressive to see. And like I said, Bubba Wallace becoming the first African American driver to win since Wendell Scott did in the modern era, since the modern era began, and it's only the second driver in history of NASCAR African American driver to win. So I think it's really, really impressive to see that Bubba Wallace was able to do that. And on top of that, it got so much national media attention, and a lot of people became fans of NASCAR because of this race. Again, ratings don't really show that, but of course, he had a dish blackout that really happened, which lost a lot of the viewership right there. But it got so much attention. You had big celebrities talking about this, and I guarantee that there were a lot of people that went ahead and bought Bubba Wallace merchandise and became fans of Bubba Wallace. Now, of course, probably some people lost some of their respect for him because, of course, he didn't do really well. But, of course, they haven't been shown a lot of great things at points this year, but they are a new team, so you can't really criticize them on that aspect. But to me, I think it's really, really exciting that Bubba Wallace was create a lot of merchandise and a lot of sales for the sport. It's great to see the NASCAR.com and merchandise sales continue to grow. And I would not be surprised eventually if Bubba Wallace does eventually get his own merchandise haulers. There's a lot of people that are fans of Bubba Wallace, and I think he will get his own merchandise haulers really, really soon. I'm really happy about this for sure, and I think the future of sport is really promising right now, especially for all the other respective series. And I'm glad to see that Bubba Wallace was able to get a lot of sales after winning that race at Talladega. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the owners' points battle after this past weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. With only 3 races to go after this weekend at Texas Motor Speedway, the owners' points battle for the final spot for the charter teams is very interesting. Currently, the 15 sits last in charter points right now for the top 33 teams in charter points. The 51 needs 4 to 5 points in order to avoid potential repossession by NASCAR. For a lot of you that have not been paying attention, if your car is in the last 3 positions in the charter points for 3 consecutive years, NASCAR can go ahead and repossess that specific charter. Now, that 51 charter is a petty wear charter. Now, NASCAR does not have to do it, but if NASCAR sees you've been there for 3 straight years in the final 3 positions, NASCAR overall can go ahead and say, hey, we may go ahead and just repossess your charter and may just take your charter away. Honestly, I would not be shocked if NASCAR would maybe do something, but at the same time, I don't see NASCAR selling it. Now, we do know that there has been some negotiations in regards to the petty wear charter potentially getting sold. And I think at this point, we know that Ricciardo Racing is going to be upgrading their cars going into next year. They're going to be having a alliance at SHR, and they're getting Roush Yates engines. I know the SHR's had a downsize, has not really had a good year, but I think that they're going to improve going into next year. So hopefully we'll see them improve next year. At the same time, I do think negotiations for that petty wear charter are going to become very, very interesting. But there's potential NASCAR could take this charter. And if this charter does go up, it could go to a team like, let's say, GMS Racing or 2311 Racing. You can go to a team that actually wants to prove themselves. And I'm not saying Ricciardo Racing next year is not going to want to come in here and they're not going to want to prove themselves. But at the same time, it definitely is really frustrating that you have teams that do want to become very, very competitive and they're not showing it right now. So it's definitely really frustrating. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But I do find this interesting for sure as a whole. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about pre-race driver meetings. It was reported on the Door Bumper Clear podcast last night when the podcast came out that pre-race driver meetings were not expected to return in 2022. There have been some rumors for a couple weeks now that there's potential of pre-race driver meetings not potentially coming back. Then this has not entirely been confirmed by NASCAR, but I do think the reason why that this is happening potentially next year is because of the fact of the COVID-19 cases. And NASCAR has been having pre-race driver meetings basically on Zoom calls before the green flag drops. If you're not part of those meetings, you do basically have to go to the rear of the field for the green flag drops. Is how pre-race driver meetings tend to happen. So I do find it definitely interesting that pre-race driver meetings are not going to be coming back. But this also, I do feel a little frustrated about at the same time as well. Again, this is not confirmed, by the way, so don't take what exactly what it says. But at the same time, I would like to see NASCAR continue the pre-race driver meetings. I think it's going to hurt the weekend as a whole if they are not coming back next year. I think it's great for the weekend. Now, I do think if some drivers don't entirely care, I think some drivers would be really, really happy if we didn't have pre-race driver meetings. And again, I think it would make a lot more sense to focus on getting focused for those specific races than as a whole trying to have all these pre-race driver meetings. You have to go all these specific events and just go into the race as a whole. I think NASCAR has been trying to cut back the weekend. There's talk that practice qualifying is going to be very, very short. They're talking about practice only being potentially up for 30 to 45 minutes, or even shorter than that, like a really glorified test session, and then going basically into, right in the qualifying. They're talking about these one-day shows, which is going to save the teams a lot of money, but at the same time, it's going to hurt the product as a whole. So to me, I'm definitely intrigued to see if this does get confirmed. If it doesn't get confirmed, it is what it is, but it's very likely the pre-race drive meetings are not going to be coming back next year. It's definitely really frustrating. Hopefully that they do come back. I would like to see them come back next year, but there's a very strong possibility and a very strong chance that pre-race drive meetings will not be returning in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about most popular driver voting. It was reported by Bob Pires that it is expected, and the plan is to have the voting for the most popular driver voting to begin right after the conclusion of the Phoenix race. Now, right now, I don't think that there are a lot of drivers that are potentially going to win the pre-race driver voting. I think there is potential competition this year than past years. You do have a few drivers that could be eligible for that. You have Kyle Larson this year, who's been very, very popular this year. I've seen a lot more people that have become Kyle Larson fans this year, and I still think Chase Elliott is probably still going to win the most popular driver award. I really think he's probably going to win, let's be honest. It's freaking Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott is the most popular driver in NASCAR right now, but at the same time, it's very, very possible that Kyle Larson could surprise and steal the most popular driver award. Again, I think there's also been a lot of resentment on Kyle Larson because Kyle Larson's dominated this year. It seems like the most successful drivers, they do get a lot of backlash, even though this year I've seen a lot more people that are happy about Kyle Larson winning than people that have not been happy about Kyle Larson winning so far. But at the same time, it's very possible that we may see a new most popular driver award. But I'll be honest, you have people that are huge fans, so I expect that Chase Elliott is going to win the most popular driver award, but I think that he's going to have competition this year. I think Kyle Larson's going to have a chance to potentially steal the most popular driver award. If he does that, I will be entirely shocked, but definitely interested that they're waiting. They usually go earlier. They usually start having the most popular driver voting a little bit earlier this year. So I'm definitely shocked if they're waiting until after the season's over, because the awards banquet is literally not that far away. And they're bringing that awards banquet back this year, I believe, in Nashville. And I believe that's in early December. So that's not too far away after that, or late November. So definitely interesting that they're waiting this close to the awards banquet to have the most popular driver voting come around. We'll have to wait and see what happens with the most popular driver voting. It looks like will be taking place a little bit later this year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about F1 in Las Vegas. It was reported by Adam Stern that a group of executives from Las Vegas will travel the Circuit of the Americas for this weekend's F1 race to explore bringing an F1 race back to the Sin City as early as 2023. Now, there are going to be 2 F1 races that are going to be taking place next year. There's going to be the usual USGP, which is going to be taking place at Circuit of Americas, which have had an F1 race since 2012. But there's also going to be a new Formula 1 race that's going to be taking place in Miami called the Miami Grand Prix, which is going to be taking place on May 8th of 2022, which is going to be during the Darlington weekend. Also, I believe during the Indy GP weekend at the same time as well. It's really exciting to see that F1 is having a growing presence in America right now. And potentially have 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 potential F1 races, especially in Las Vegas. Now, F1 has raced in Las Vegas in the past. They've raced around Caesar's Palace in the past. And that event was very, very successful, but they haven't raced F1 around the track, at least since the 1980s. So the fact that there's potentially F1 coming to Las Vegas as early as 2023 is really, really exciting. And thank Liberty Media for this, because Liberty Media, and you look at US as well, there has been a growing attraction of people from the F1 world. You also look at what's been happening in the ownership world. There's potential that in Michael Andretti is potentially going to buy the Sauber team and bring an American driver that I think is really, really talented, like Colton Herta, to F1 next year. Though if I'm Michael Andretti, I wait a year, potentially put him as your reserve driver if something happens to your main drivers. Put him in there in 2023, let him have 1 more year in IndyCar, and then bring him over in 2023 full-time to F1. Wait to see how Sauber is as an organization. But I think it's really exciting that there is a huge growing aspect of potentially a team, potentially F1 going to Las Vegas. I think it will be really good for the city. I think it'll be really good for the sport as a whole if this does happen. I'm really excited about the future of F1. F1's future is really, really promising right now with how much talent they have. They have a lot of young talent coming through their pipeline that I think is really cool. And potentially an American driver that I think actually, if Sauber is successful and if Andretti does come through and does really, really good at getting the team ready to go, because he's potentially going to buy 80% stake of the organization, I think it will be very, very successful. I'm really excited about the future of their F1 program. I think it's really exciting, and I'm looking forward to their program going into next year. So I think it's really, really exciting. I think it's really exciting about F1's growth in the United States. They've been getting a lot of races, over the million people watching them, and I think that there should be a lot of excitement from the fans as a whole going into next year for the Formula One programs. Now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Jeb Burton. As it was reported during the Xfinity Series race at Texas Motor Speedway, that Jeb Burton has multiple offers for next year and is expected to be back in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in 2022. This is definitely interesting because Jeb Burton is not going to be returning to Kaulig Racing on a full-time basis in 2022. In Xfinity Series, someone will probably be taking over. I would assume the Maya Center is going to be taking that ride. What I definitely find really interesting, though, is Jeb Burton. There's been some potential rumors that he could go to the Cup Series next year, but what teams could potentially be looking at Jeb Burton next year? Maybe Our Motorsports. I know he does have a little bit of funding from State Water Heaters. He does have some funding from that. He's been funded by them really for a lot of his career. But with Nutrien AG dropping out, him leaving that team, does he have enough funding to go full-time with Our Motorsports? That's definitely interesting. Maybe he's the driver that's going to Ricciardo Racing. I know Jeb Burton has a lot of fans, and there's been reports even from the Door Bumper Clear podcast that the driver they're potentially looking at to go to that team is someone that is very, very popular. I know Jeb Burton has a lot of fans, so he potentially could be the second driver that is going to that organization. But to me, I really do not know where he's going next year. If he is going back full-time in Xfinity Series next year, I do think he has a good shot to be somewhat competitive. I'm not entirely sure how he is going to do, but I do think he has potential of being a solid driver as a whole, and hopefully Jeb Burton will do good things next year in Xfinity. If he is going back to the team Xfinity next year, hopefully he'll do very well, and if he's got to make the playoffs and he's got to win more races than just winning Talladega, I do think both the drivers that ran for the team, talk about Justin Haley and the other driver, AJ Allmendinger, I think he's got to perform very well but better than those guys. If he does that, I think he will be very successful next year and show good stuff in Xfinity next year. And now we're going to jump onto the next story of today's episode, as we are talking about Aric Almirola. As it was reported yesterday, someone asked him in regards to the 10 car for next year, and Bob Parker said that SHR is still waiting on Smithfield to renew for next season, and decision has to come in the next month or so. Now, he also did mention that that win at New Hampshire is probably going to help potentially keep him at the team next year. This is definitely really interesting to me because Aric Almirola said a couple months ago, talking to reporters, that he said that he's expected to return to Stewart-Haas Racing next year. Now, if Smithfield does renew next year, it's unclear how many races they're going to renew, but if they do renew next year, then Aric Almirola will 100% for sure be back. But we thought 100% sure that Aric Almirola was 100% going to be back at SHR next year. The fact that this report comes out and he may not be back at SHR next year is definitely really interesting, though. I do feel very confident that he will be back at Stewart-Haas Racing next year. I do think that Smithfield is going to renew. I mean, he made the playoffs next year with Smithfield representation on the car. So I would assume that Aric Almirola is going to be back at Stewart-Haas Racing next year. Now, if he doesn't return to SHR next year, what drivers could they get next year? Maybe Matt DiBenedetto. I know Matt DiBenedetto said he would like to be in Cup. He also said any offer would be really, really good. He could be definitely a potential candidate that goes to the 10 car next year. I think he's a solid enough driver, and I do think that SHR will be better next year. And they've got SHR affiliation with Rick Ware. I know he's been called by Ricker Racing, which they're getting SHR equipment. So maybe Matty D would be a potential candidate. But to me, I do think that Aric Almirola is going to go back to SHR next year. I think he's going to return. But if they don't keep Aric Almirola next year and they don't get a guy like Ryan Preece, I think that Matt DiBenedetto would definitely be a really good candidate for a potential ride. But I do still feel like Matty D is going to win Xfinity. I really think that is going to be the case next year, and I think that Matt DiBenedetto returns to Xfinity. I think he's going to be in Xfinity or he's going to go somewhere else. We'll have to see what happens, but I think Aric Almirola for sure is going to go back to SHR next year. I think he deserves it, and I think he should go back. I know, like I said, he's been a down year for him, but I think he deserves to go back to Stewart-Haas Racing next year. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about William Byron. Now, last week we talked about on this channel how Liberty University signed a 5-year extension with Hendrick Motorsports through the 2026 season. And with that, William Byron is expected to be with Hendrick Motorsports at least through the 2026 season. Now, William Byron is very, very young. He's been so far in the NASCAR Cup Series for a couple of years. He's been in the Cup Series since 2018 and has scored 2 career NASCAR Cup Series victories. He got his first career win at Daytona last year and picked up his second career win and his only win so far this year at Homestead Miami Speedway. I think William Byron, though being very, very young, I think ever since Rudy Fiegel got in this team, I think he has proved as a whole as a race car driver. And I really like the combination of William Byron and Rudy Fiegel. And I do think that William Byron has a very good shot and a very good possibility of being a NASCAR Cup Series champion. I really do. I think the whole Hendrick lineup going into next year, they all could win a championship. And there's potentially 2 guys that can win the championship this year. But I think all 4 guys are championship caliber drivers. And to me, I think William Byron is going to bring a lot to the table over the next 5 years. I think he absolutely deserves to return to this team next year. I really like what William Byron has been doing as a whole throughout his entire career. He's been learning very quickly, and he's only been racing for about 7-8 years. He's already won an Xfinity Series championship. He's done a lot for the first years. Again, a lot of people have called him a bust. And keep in mind, William Byron is one of the youngest drivers in the Cup Series right now. And remember, he jumped up to the Cup Series, he's only 20 years old, and he's been improving on a year-by-year basis. And the consistency here shows to me that he's no fluke. In the last couple weeks, he's really shown that he could have won this past weekend at Texas. So I do think his team has potential. They've got a lot of momentum going into next year. He could surprise a lot of people, and I think that he will actually do really good with the next-gen car. I really think he's going to do great things in that next-gen car next year. So definitely really excited about the future of his team next year, and I'm really happy to see he's going to be with this team for a very, very long time. I think Hendrick Motorsports is a core. I think they're going to be this team for a very, very long time. The only one I think that potentially could be out in the next year is going to be Alex Bowman. But we'll see William Byron there for the next few years. I'm really excited about his future, and I'm happy that William Byron will probably be with the team at least for the next 5 years. Because Liberty University signing 12 years, like I said, it's going to be with William Byron. I think William Byron's going to be there for 2026, and I think he's going to do great things with this team going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we are talking about Kyle Busch. As Kyle Busch was not very happy after the Cup Series race this past weekend at Texas Motor Speedway. He said that the newer generation of drivers have ruined it for what it is over the last 4 or 5 years. Give a little bit of reference. Kyle Busch got blocked by Chris Buescher, who's been in the Cup Series for a few years. Chris Buescher tried to make a really, really daring block on Kyle Busch. He gets turned by Kyle Busch, and unfortunately, Anthony Alfredo careens back into the outside wall, and basically he has a really, really bad accident. Now, Kyle Busch, I understand his comments, I understand his frustration. He has been in the Cup Series for a very, very long time, but I do have to counteract Kyle Busch a little bit in some ways. First thing, I do agree with Kyle, by the way, I do agree with Kyle Busch. My issue with Kyle Busch's comments is he was kind of like this as a younger driver. And I do think that as these drivers do mature and become a little bit older, I do think that they will become much better. And Kyle Busch made a lot of mistakes as a younger driver. He was a young driver back in the day, and he made a lot of mistakes as an aggressive driver, but he wasn't as bad as some of these drivers. The other big point I want to have, he employs guys like Drew Dollar, who are some of the worst drivers I have ever seen. He employs guys in the Truck Series so far, and he hasn't really shown, and some of these guys are not that good, and a lot of these guys end up being wreck-a-halls, and they wreck their cars a lot and are super aggressive and cause a lot of problems. And I do think some of these younger generation, I do agree, has those problems. But they looked up guys like Kyle Busch, who when they were younger drivers, they did cause problems and cause issues on the racetrack. So to me, I understand Kyle Busch's comments. I understand his frustration on the track. He's been in the sport for a very, very long time. But at the same time, I do have to contradict Kyle Busch's comments, but I do understand his points, and I do understand his frustration as a whole. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about the 2021 Formula One schedule that was revealed on Friday afternoon. Let's go through the full schedules. There's a lot of changes to the schedule. So, starting off for the 2022 Formula One schedule, the Bahrain GP will kick it off on the March 18th to 20th weekend. Right after that, the Saudi Arabian GP will take place on March 27th, 5th through 27th. The third race will be the Australian GP, which did not have a race this year, did not have a race last year. That will take place on April 8th through 10th, pending COVID restrictions. Race 4 will be the Emilia GP on April 22nd to 24th, and then after that, the new track, the Miami GP, on May 6th through 8th. Right after that will be the Spanish GP on May 20th through 22nd. Then after that, the next week, will be the Monaco GP on May 27th, 29th, which will have complications as a whole with the Indy 500 because, once again, the Indy 500, Monaco GP, and the Coke 600 will all happen on the same weekend, which will be really, really exciting. Right after that, there will be a 1 week break, and then we'll have the Baku GP, the Azerbaijan GP at Baku from June 10th to 12th. And then the next week, we'll go to Canada pending COVID-19 restrictions on June 17th to 19th. Right after that will be the British Grand Prix on July 1st to 3rd on the 4th of July weekend. And then the next week will be the Austrian GP on July 8th through 10th. After that will be the French GP 2 weeks later on July 22nd to 24th. And after that will be the Hungarian GP the next week from July 29th to 31st. After that, they'll have a couple-week break for their summer break, of course. And then we'll have the Belgian GP on August 26th through 28th. And then the next week, we'll have the Dutch GP at Zandvoort on September 2nd through 4th. After that will be the Italian GP the next week on September 9th through 11th, and then a 1 week break before we go to Russia and Sochi on September 23rd to 25th for race 17. Then on race 18, we make our return to Singapore on September 30th through October 2nd, and then we will make our return to F1 on the 19th race at Japan on October 7th to 9th the next week. Then we'll have a 1 week break, and then a race number 20 will be the United States Grand Prix on October 21st through 23rd, and then the next week will be the Mexican GP on October 28th through 30th. Right after that will be the Brazilian GP on November 11th through 13th, and then the season finale will once again take place at the Yas Marina Circuit at the Abu Dhabi GP on November 18th through 20th. Here's some things I want to talk about. I really like this F1 schedule. I believe that this is the most Formula 1 races that have taken place in a single season. And the fact that they're adding a Miami GP to the schedule is really, really exciting. And a return of some tracks that are not on the F1 schedule this year. Talk about the Australian GP because of COVID-19 restrictions. Canadian GP for COVID. Singapore making its turn for the first time in a few years. And the Japanese Grand Prix due to COVID-19 restrictions. Now, there are some races that I'm definitely worried about, of course. Australian GP and Canadian GP, I do have to be worried about for this couple reasons. Number one, of course, Canada is very COVID-19 restricted heavy right now, and the Australian GP, there's a lot of potential COVID restrictions, and the reason that NASCAR is not having a race in Canada right now is because of COVID-19 restrictions. But at the same time, I think that this schedule is really, really exciting. You've got a mixture of countries. You've got 2 United States races, which I think is the first time that we've had 2 U.S. races in the same year in quite some time. I think it's really exciting. You also do, they're not, unfortunately, one thing I don't like is the fact that you're going to have the Monaco GP and Indy 500 the same weekend, because some of these F1 guys were probably thinking about running the Indy 500, but they're probably not going to do that now because of restrictions. But at the same time, I think the schedule looks really, really cool as a whole. I'm really excited for the F1 season going into next year. And they're starting the season a little bit. I think they're starting the season about the same time they normally started. And instead of kicking it off in Australia, I think they move Australia a little bit farther back because of the fact that COVID could still be a thing as early as March next year. I'm really excited about the future of F1, and next year's schedule looks really, really awesome. And I'm looking forward to the F1 season in 2022. And now we're going to jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Kevin Harvick versus Chase Elliott once again. As Kevin Harvick was asked about the conversation between he and Chase Elliott in NASCAR, and he said it lasted about 45 seconds. Now, we've talked about this beef quite a few times. I'm going to do a little bit of backstory on the whole beef. I'm not going to go through everything because there's a lot to go into. Chase Elliott and Kevin Harvick had issues at Bristol. Chase Elliott was battling Kevin Harvick hard for the win. Kevin Harvick put Chase Elliott in the wall. Chase Elliott basically screws Kevin Harvick basically out of a win. Kyle Larson passed him 4 laps to go. Both of them have a feud. Kevin Harvick calls it a chicken shit move. Chase Elliott says, I don't care how long he's been racing. I do want to re-respect it as a whole, as a racer. Then Kevin Harvick said the next week in Vegas that it had been the maddest he'd ever been. And Chase Elliott seemed he wanted to move on. Things kind of calmed down for the next 2 weeks. And then Kevin Harvick and Chase Elliott feud began once again after the fact that basically Chase Elliott got dumped by Kevin Harvick at the Charlotte for the championship race. Chase Elliott tried to wreck Kevin Harvick on the going into turn number 1 on the normal track and got Cole Custer instead. Then Kevin Harvick got mind gamed by Chase Elliott. Kevin Harvick ran straight into the inside tire. Barry locked up the tires. Then he said, you remember Bristol, basically telling he 100% confirming that he intentionally wrecked Chase Elliott. And then Chase Elliott said in the post-race, he said, Merry off-season, Happy Christmas. Before the green flag dropped in the media center, they literally had a Christmas tree at Texas Motor Speedway basically have it saying Merry off-season, Happy Christmas. And they also sold shirts for Chase Elliott and Kevin Harvick. Well, Chase Elliott sold shirts on a store basically saying Merry off-season and Happy Christmas. And you would think that Kevin Harvick at this point had moved on. Chase Elliott said he's moved on from the incident, but Kevin Harvick said I'm still baffled that he's worried about me. I had no chance to win the championship. Looks like he should figure out how to take the same car and run as fast as the 5. Man, at this point, Kevin Harvick, I want to say this. I think Kevin Harvick needs to seriously move on from this incident. Kevin Harvick is way older than Chase Elliott. He's almost half older age. Kevin Harvick is 45, going to be 46 at the end of this year. And yet Kevin Harvick is still obsessed about, it seems like he's obsessed about Chase Elliott. Don't get me wrong, I understand Kevin Harvick being really frustrated because, again, he was looking for his first career win. Not first career win, I don't know why I say first career win. But he's looking for his first win of the season after a frustrating year. And Kevin Harvick said he was the maddest he's ever been. The fact that Kevin Harvick has not moved on from the incident shows the lack of maturity from Kevin Harvick. He's been in NASCAR for 21 years, and he's had so many feuds with drivers like Kyle Busch and Joey Logano, among other drivers. And he's still mad about Chase Elliott. And Kevin Harvick is not a 25-year-old kid anymore. He's in his 40s, and he's still acting like this at this current moment. Now, I don't expect Kevin Harvick to affect Chase Elliott on the racetrack. I don't think there's going to be an ongoing feud. I do think they're going to spats in the media center. Because I think Kevin Harvick, if he does it, because NASCAR did say that if Kevin Harvick does affect Chase Elliott, there could potentially be consequences between these two implications going into next year. Which I think definitely find really, really interesting in regards to that. We'll have to wait and see what happens if things do continue in regards to this feud. But man, Kevin Harvick just cannot seem to let go with this feud from Chase Elliott. It's definitely frustrating if you're Chase Elliott because, again, you want to move on from the incident. And Chase Elliott seems like he moved on a few weeks ago, but Kevin Harvick has not moved on from the feud. It's definitely interesting. We'll have to wait and see if there's more ongoing situations going on from this. And now we're going to go ahead and jump on to the next major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Chase Briscoe versus Denny Hamlin. Now, to give a little bit of backstory, during the Cup Series race around 60 laps ago, Chase Briscoe tried to make a really, really aggressive move on the outside of Texas Motor Speedway. While Denny Hamlin did not give him enough room, Chase Briscoe tried to make a move that I didn't think was really going to work, and he got into the outside wall and cut a tire. And he also had more issues where Denny Hamlin was involved in another incident that was kind of caused by Chase Briscoe, though Chris Buescher kind of caused that incident as well, and Denny Hamlin got a lot of damage. The incident gets posted on the Instagram page for NASCAR and NBC, and basically Chase Briscoe made comments under that saying, if I had 10,000 races worth of experience under my belt. Denny Hamlin makes a comeback at Chase Briscoe saying, not sure you'll get there. There's cars racing for a championship. In case you forgot about taking out the leader and causing him already one championship already this season, perhaps when you learn give and take, you will start to finish better. Seems like Denny Hamlin's giving a little bit of advice, but it's a little bit of a comeback as well, and he's throwing a little bit of jabs at Chase Briscoe after what happened at the Indianapolis Road Course. This has kind of been going on for a long time that really started back at the Indianapolis Road Course. If you saw what happened in Indy Road Course on the last restart, Denny Hamlin and Chase Briscoe are battling for the race win. Chase Briscoe goes wide. Denny Hamlin does nothing wrong, in my opinion. And Chase Briscoe literally goes to the grass, and he knows, though he doesn't know he's going to get a penalty at the time. Chase Briscoe dumps Denny Hamlin a few corners away and then gets a penalty right after that. Denny Hamlin and Chase Briscoe were not really happy with each other after the incident. It seemed like they were going to move on for him, and Denny Hamlin's comments definitely showed that he was really, really frustrated with Chase Briscoe. In my opinion, I have to side with Denny Hamlin here. Don't get me wrong; I'm more of a fan of Chase Briscoe than I am a fan of Denny Hamlin. I like Denny Hamlin a lot, but I like Chase Briscoe better as a driver. But still, Chase Briscoe has shown a lot of inexperience and a lot of mistakes here. But also, I don't think the cars have been really performing that great this year. And Denny Hamlin is not wrong, and I think he's referencing the fact that Denny Hamlin probably would have potentially won the regular season championship this year over Kyle Larson, and that wreck at Indy Road Course cost Denny Hamlin a shot at winning the regular season championship because he was not able to make enough points at Daytona and was not able to make up enough points at Michigan. So to me, I understand Denny Hamlin's frustration in many, many ways. He hasn't really had a good week, and we'll talk about the next story, which will definitely be really, really important to talk about. But at the same time, I understand why Denny Hamlin's frustrated at Chase Briscoe. I understand Chase Briscoe being frustrated. I just feel like he was done wrong there. But at the same time, I feel like Denny Hamlin's more in the right in this situation. Like I said, I'm more a big fan of Chase Briscoe. But at the same time, I want this feud to end. I want this stuff to kind of simmer down a little bit, and hopefully these two can figure this out really, really soon. I like to see them not have comments on Instagram. I like to see both these guys kind of talk it out, like in the media center or something like that. Get the situation sorted, as I do find it frustrating. They're both still having spats ongoing at this point. But I understand Denny Hamlin's point and understand some of his comments, giving a little bit of advice, saying, hey, man, you can't race me that aggressive. And this younger generation of drivers coming up, while the younger generation does need to learn about aggression, at the same time, there's a point where it can be a little bit too far, and at the same time, they got to learn how to chill out a little bit. And I think Chase Briscoe does have to learn that a little bit going into next year. We'll have to wait and see what happens if things continue between these two, but you got a guy that's still racing for a championship, and Chase Briscoe does have to race Denny Hamlin a little bit smarter. I understand that Chase Briscoe is trying to go out there and win races, and he had a really good day going up until that point. He had a top 10 car, and he's been improving as a driver. But at the same time, Chase Briscoe has to learn that you're racing a guy that's trying to win a championship. You're not in a championship, didn't make the playoffs this year, and I know you had a chance to win the race at Indianapolis, but he didn't take you out. You took yourself out, and you had 25 weeks in the past to try to make a move to pass him. So I'm going to side with Denny Hamlin here, and hopefully maybe things won't continue, but we'll have to wait and see what happens if feuds continue going forward. And now we're going to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're going to talk about Denny Hamlin and 23XI Racing. Now, Denny Hamlin spoke to reporters for the green flag drop at Texas Motor Speedway, and he talked about 23XI not getting the charter front row. He says he's disappointed that the deal with front row to obtain a charter that he didn't get the charter from 23XI Racing has fallen through. He describes next steps in a team approach. He says the team will race 2 cars next year, no matter whether it not has 1 charter or 2 going into next year. He added further comments, and this was reported by Adam Stern. There was further comments added, and he says, spoke on the possibility of running second car without a second charter next year. It certainly is not going to be financially good for us, but this whole effing sport is financially not good for us. What's the difference? Man, Denny Hamlin speaking some truth right there. I think this shows a lot of faults from the charter system currently. I'm not a big fan of the charter system. Again, a lot of the owners are big fans of the charter system, but the fact that it costs so much to get a charter right now, and the fact that NASCAR took a lot of that money from the charter teams, the unchartered teams, I should say, only giving them 1% of what they used to get. They used to get about 20% of the funds, and they lost a lot of the funding that the charter games currently get at the moment. They lost a lot of the funding and don't really get a lot of the funding currently at the moment. They only, I think, get like 1/10 or 1/16 of that current funding at the moment. Now, we know this past week that the charter deal with Front Row, we all thought the charter deal was 100% going to go through for 2022, but that charter deal unfortunately fell through at last minute. He believed that that charter deal was going to go through, and it did not go through. Now, we're expecting Front Row to, as of right now, only maybe have 1 car, but they're expected to potentially have 2 cars next year, and they may have multiple drivers next year. Now, if you're in a situation for Kurt Busch going into next year for charters. Now, I still think that there is a potential possibility that Denny Hamlin could get a charter for Kurt Busch next year. There are potentially a few teams he could look at next year. First one, of course, has to be Spire Motorsports. There's been talk that Spire Motorsports is going to buy a charter from Starcom Racing. That's expected to happen. I know Spire may want to run 2 cars next year, but if Denny Hamlin in 23XI have the funding, which they do have the funding right now, they potentially could get a charter for Starcom Racing next year. I do have some, not Starcom Racing, for Kurt Busch next year from the Spire camp going into next year. I do think that that is definitely possible for next year. But I think that there's one potential team that he can go talk to, Ricciardo Racing. Ricciardo Racing is expected right now to only have potentially 2 cars, and they may have a 3rd car next year, but they're talking about maybe selling that Petty Ware. It's unsure if that lease is going to continue going into next year. I know Ricciardo wants to run only like 2 really competitive cars, but they may run a 3rd car going into next year as well, so we'll have to wait and see what happens in regards to that. But they are expected to sell their charter for next year as well. If I'm Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin, I need to try to get that charter for Kurt Busch. I think if they can get the charter for Kurt Busch going next year, I think they have a very good chance of being a very successful team for Kurt Busch. Because I think while I don't think Kurt Busch is going to have any trouble going into next year, I think it's really important trying to get next-gen parts and pieces. That 45 car could be really in a big hole for next year. Now, speaking, if they're not able to get a charter for next year, what happens to the team? Well, I think the team will still be very competitive. I don't see the team running into problems. Now, they could have issues getting parts and pieces because the charter teams are going to be more preferred in getting those parts and pieces for the next-gen car than the teams that don't have charters for going into next year. So hopefully they're able to find a way to get a charter for next year for Kurt Busch. I think that they will get a charter for Kurt Busch this year. I believe that that is going to be the case. However, I'm not sure if they don't get a charter. The only race I'm really worried about them is trying to get into Daytona 500, though we saw Bubba Wallace have a lot of speed when they did attempt to qualify in for the Daytona 500. So I am hoping that they can get a charter for Kurt Busch next year, especially if owners' points do become a thing, because that 45 is not going to have a lot of owners' points next year, and they're going to refer back to the last position of owners' points. So I'm hoping that Kurt Busch and this team can get the funding going into next year. Again, The good news for next year, at least for this year, there's no formula going into next year. The good news is that there is going to be practice qualifying next year, so there won't be issues right there. But they got to try to pursue that charter for Rick Ware. If they can't get that charter for Rick Ware, they're going to have major, major problems, in my honest opinion. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. But they're still searching for a charter. Hopefully, they're able to find a charter for Kurt Busch next year. So, anyway, that is going to be for today's NASCAR news video and F1 video at the same time. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, notifications to be notified when a video does go live on the channel. Follow me Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support page on the list schedule below for that, and comment your thoughts on today's video. Do you think that 2311 Racing is going to be able to get a charter for Kurt Busch or not? Let me know in the comments below, and let me know your thoughts on all the other stories we discussed here today on the channel. Let me know in the comments below. Anyway, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for some more great and awesome NASCAR content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.